9th of August in 1971. It was resisted overnight by the Catholic working class people, who were the only people who were interned. None of the loyalist gunmen were interned. Internment has been used for centuries by the British against Irish and lots of other people. It was the British, after all, who invented concentration camps in South Africa. And internment merely means that you can be arrested without any charge. There is no trial. You're just put into a camp or a prison and held there for as long as the government want. In August 1971, 342 people were arrested, including myself, and held for some up to 4 years. I myself was released after 2 months and given compensation, but most people were not so lucky. The numbers in turn rose to over 2,000, but during most of the process, people were very badly beaten. Torture began on a full scale, and under the British, they decided that they would end internment, which they did at the end of 1974, releasing everyone. What happened then, however, was that instead of being interned, what would happen was they set up special courts called diplock courts, named after the judge who started the system. And in these courts, mostly the only evidence against people is alleged confessions which they have made. This means that the police can arrest people and hold them for up to 7 days in detention centres and interrogation centres, particular places like Castlereagh, which is now notorious throughout the world. While there, people have been very badly beaten, tortured, subjected to sensory deprivation torture, and on many occasions the British have now been brought up before the European Court of Human Rights at Strasbourg. They've been condemned by the Red Cross, they've been condemned by Amnesty International, and they've been condemned by World Opinion. They, however, say that the people who are brought before these diplock courts, well, there is just one judge sitting, there is no jury, and the conviction rate is 90%. So for every 10 people brought up before the court, 9 are going to be sentenced, in some cases up to 30 years in prison, solely on these confessions which have been beaten out of them. And consequently, the pressure has been put on the police and the army in order to get convictions. The pressure is on them to torture, to beat suspects so that they can produce evidence, as they call it. And then it's regarded by most of the Catholic working class people as a conveyor belt system. You go to Castlereagh, then they send you, you're interrogated or tortured. You then are put before one judge, who are all appointed by the state and are, most of them, former unionist politicians, loyalist politicians. You're then sentenced and you end up in Long Kesh.
I was sentenced to 3 years on a non-jury diplock court by a judge who was appointed by the British government. After being sentenced, I was transferred from Cumberland Prison, Belfast, to the H blocks. And when I entered, I was taken to an empty cell. There was no one else in the block. I was the first person to go through the new British system. I was then stripped of all my personal clothing. It was then that the prison establishment gave me a blanket. I didn't ask them for a blanket, they threw in to me. In fact, it was them which were responsible for the term. And the blanket, I was quite prepared to sit for the 3 years without anything. They gave me the blanket and I wrapped it around me.
I was arrested in November 1976 after dawn raid in my home, and I was then taken to Castlereagh RUC station. I was in the station for no more than 30 minutes when a police officer came in and informed me that they had found a rifle at my home and that I was going to be charged with it. I was then taken from Castlereagh to a magistrate's court where I was formally charged, and from there to Armagh prison. And from November until September of '77, I was held in Armagh remand. When I was brought to court for trial, the judge asked the police officer to produce the weapon that he was supposed to have found at my home, and the police officer stated that the weapon had been lost on the way to forensic. The judge then asked him why I was charged with membership of the IRA and what evidence they had, and the police officer stated that they had strong reason to believe that I was a member of the IRA and had carried out Republican activities. And on the strength of the policeman's word, I was sentenced to 3 years in Armagh prison. When I entered Armagh, there was already 32 guards on protest. At that time, our form of protest was a no-work protest. We refused to do prison work and to carry out any prison rules. There was no prison uniform for women, so therefore we weren't on a blanket protest because we were allowed to wear our own clothes.
The H blocks were built by the British government to try and individualise each prisoner by placing them in a cell of his own, by making them wear a uniform, by making them do prison work. When I entered the H blocks, first of all, myself, like the rest of them, were met with brutal attacks by the prison guards. This took form of number one deaths, beatings, and generally harassment of ourselves. The H blocks itself, there's 25 cells in the wing. Now, each cell is just enough for one prisoner to have enough room to live in. What happened due to the number of men and through the courts, there was no room in the H blocks, so in fact they had to put 2 in a cell. Now, that's where the 2 men lay on the floor on a thin mattress with a blanket around them. The screws were very, very vicious towards us. It wasn't simply a job to them. Simply was they are loyalists. A lot of them were from England, Scotland and Wales. We have some from Canada and even some from Holland who came for the big money. It came to the stage where men were taken out, beaten up very badly, so we decided that if we're going to get beaten up anyway, we might as well try and protect ourselves. And that resulted in a lot of us being put in solitary confinement for a month on the boards, you know. These are the things which kept up.
The next day we were unlocked at 9 o'clock and informed by the prison wardens that we were allowed out for 1 hour's exercise. We went down to empty our chamber pots in the toilet and they got moist, and we found that both the toilets and the bathrooms had been locked. And we asked the prison officers if they would open the toilets, and they refused. They stated that we were allowed out for 1 hour's exercise, and this meant 1 hour in the exercise yard and nothing else. And when we asked them where we were supposed to empty the chambers and everything else, they told us that we could do whatever we wanted with them. So from then, full-scale noise protest developed in Armagh. We continued to empty the chamber pots out the windows, and on the 13th of February we were moved from B wing to A wing. The toilets and bathrooms were still locked this time, and we were still emptying the chambers out the windows, and we hadn't got washed in 2 weeks. The prison wardens then came around again and boarded up the windows, and this meant there was no ventilation, there was no light in the cell, and above all it meant that we couldn't empty the contents of the chambers out the windows. So we had to smear the contents of the chambers around the cell walls, which was our own excreta, and our urine was poured out the door. After about 3 weeks of this, the male wardens were sent in again, and a series of systematic beatings occurred of the women prisoners, where they would go from cell to cell and take the prisoners out, give them a hiding and throw them back in. When any of us were beaten up and asked for medical attention, we were told by the prison doctor that we wouldn't receive any medical treatment until we conformed to the criminalisation, and this of course we refused to do. We were also refused sanitary protection during our menstrual cycle for the first 3 months of the protest. And the only reason that we were given any sanitary protection was because of the outcry of the people on the outside. They then come round and give us the sanitary protection, and when they first give it to us, they just opened the door and threw the sanitary towels into the cell. They landed on the floor, and the floor was covered in excreta and urine, so we couldn't use them anyway. The governor then sent for Maria Farrell and told her that he would allow us to get washed and to use the bathrooms, but this would be classed as a privilege which he could take away at any time, and we refused to get washed or anything else because we didn't want the same thing happening. This happened on the 7th of February. A lot of the women took gastroenteritis, vomit and diarrhea. We sent for the doctor. The nursing sister came over, and the only medical advice that we got was not to eat or drink anything for 3 days.
The British government, in another attempt to smash the protest, first of all refused us access to the washing and toilet facilities, the medical facilities and any other facilities available for any prisoner. This was refused to us, so in fact we began to put the human waste on the walls, not because we liked doing it, it was very sickening, but because they refused to empty the contents of the pots. And when they came into the cell, they kicked the waste all over our mattress and blanket, which we had to live on. So we had no other option but to place it on the wall, and that went on for well over a year. People were dropping down with diseases, taking rashes, taking germs, but there again there was no medical facilities available for the prisoners, simply because the reasons why you see a doctor was, first of all, you had to wear a prison uniform, you had to address the doctor and governors as sir, which is totally unacceptable to us as Republicans. This is another way that the British government were prepared to try and break our protest. By refusing us all these basic things, they believed that we couldn't last another 6 months after that. In fact, the protest has been on now over 5 years. They in fact believed the more they attacked us, the more of us would end the protest. It had the opposite effect. The more they attacked us, the more we resisted.
Am 1. März 1981 trat Bobby Sands im Konzentrationslager Long Cache in den Hungerstreik. Er war wegen Mitgliedschaft in der IAA und illegalem Waffenbesitz zu 14 Jahren Haft verurteilt worden. Während seines Hungerstreiks wurde er als Abgeordneter ins englische Parlament gewählt. Bobby starb nach 66 Tagen. Er hatte den politischen Status für sich und seine Mitgefangenen gefordert. 9 weitere Gefangene folgten ihm in den Tod. Der Hungerstreik hatte Signalwirkung. Im Norden lieferten sich Jugendliche mit der Armee blutige Straßenschlachten. In Dublin, der Hauptstadt Südirlands, versuchten 17.000 Menschen, die britische Botschaft zu stürmen. Während des Hungerstreiks ist die Lage in Belfast gespannt. Der militante Widerstand wird mobilisiert. Täglich brennen LKWs. Die eroberten Lebensmittel werden gesammelt und verteilt. 15- bis 16-jährige Jugendliche stoppen die Fahrzeuge und zwingen die Fahrer auszusteigen. Die öffentliche Verbrennung wird den Kindern überlassen. Die Eltern lassen die Haustüren offen, damit die Kinder Fluchtmöglichkeiten haben. Hier in Turf Lodge ist die Zugangsstraße zum Viertel mit einem seit Stunden brennenden LKW verbarrikadiert. Der andere Zugang ist nur notdürftig gesichert. Mit dem Pkw kann man nur noch über den Bürgersteig hinein. Allein die Armee kann die Barrikaden durchbrechen. Ständig laufen Kinder zwischen beiden Zufahrten hin und her, um vor Überraschungsangriffen sicher zu sein. In diesem Sommer sind solche Szenen Alltag. Sie sind nicht besonders spektakulär oder dramatisch. Viele Bewohner nehmen kaum Notiz von dem Geschehen, finden so eine Verbrennung kaum erwähnenswert. Aber die Briten kostet dieser Kleinkrieg viel Geld. Der Schaden wird von der Regierung in London bezahlt. Die Soldaten müssen die Wracks jeden Morgen beiseite räumen. Neben dem militärischen Widerstand gibt es fast jede Form des friedlichen Protests. Morgens stehen Frauen und Männer auf den Mittelstreifen der größeren Straßen und halten schwarze Fahnen und Bilder der Hungerstreikenden vor sich. Die Autofahrer bekunden ihre Solidarität. Auf Stellwänden wird über den aktuellen Stand des Streiks informiert. Riesige Wandmalereien stellen die Unterdrückung und den Kampf des irischen Volkes oft sehr pathetisch dar.
On Belfast streets the kids are playing, boys and girls of 9 and 10. Older brothers they are missing, political prisoners, blanket men. England's tombstone hitch blocks, smash it, support the struggle for the blanket men. These men who protest, where do they come from? Belfast, Derry, Crossmaglen, from every town, from every county, taking our brave young blanket men. England's tombstone hitch blocks, smash it, support the struggle for the blanket men. What of the women who fought beside them? In Armagh they're holding them. The other women, they are marching, leaders of the struggle for the blanket men. England's tombstone hitch blocks, smash it, support the struggle for the blanket men. Naked in their cell, brutalized and beaten, they don't fight for personal gain. Soldiers of the revolution, Emmett and Conley, now the blanket men. England's tombstone hitch blocks, smash it, support the struggle for the blanket men. Guards of hitch block, now take warning, earn big money when you can. You'll be looking for a place to hide in when Ireland frees her blanket men. England's tombstone hitch blocks, smash it, support the struggle for the blanket men.
Jeder kennt die Hungerstreikenden, weiß, wie lange sie schon hungern, rechnet sich aus, wie lange sie noch zu leben haben. Jeder neue Tote ist das Signal zum Aufstand. Frauen und Kinder schlagen mit Mülltonnendeckeln auf den Boden und alarmieren die Bevölkerung. 5 Minuten später kommen die Panzer und die Jeeps, um Ruhe und Ordnung wiederherzustellen. Auf den Straßen ist jetzt jeder freiwillig. Die Panzer durchbrechen die Barrikaden und die Soldaten feuern in die Menge oder gezielt auf einzelne Passanten. In der Mitte von Andytown liegt das PDF, ein republikanischer Pub, der IRA gehört. Er ist das Kommunikationszentrum und Mittelpunkt des Viertels. Neben solchen Pubs organisiert die IRA noch andere Kooperativen. Sie hat ein eigenes öffentliches Verkehrssystem aufgebaut, die sogenannten Black Taxis. Vor dem Eingang des PDF ist Maschendraht. Man muss sich in eine Gästeliste eintragen und kommt als Fremder nur mit einer Empfehlung hinein. Die Kontrollen sind nötig. Überfälle radikaler Loyalisten sind immer zu befürchten. Die Briten veranstalten oft Razzien und ab und an wird das Gebäude auch unter Beschuss genommen. Abends werden kleine Billardturniere veranstaltet, deren Erlös in die Knastkasse fließt. Außerdem kommt von jedem Getränk ein Penny den Hungerstreikenden zugute. Hier werden die neuen Entwicklungen im Streik diskutiert. Jeder kennt einen Hungerstreikenden oder zumindest Verwandte oder Bekannte persönlich. Erfahrungen im Knast hat hier schon fast jeder gesammelt.
All these prisoners in Long Kesh are political prisoners, but the government says that they are criminals. They are convicted of crimes. Well, they're convicted in special courts of special crimes, of special offences, after special torture.
We need government headed by Margaret Thatcher is in the meantime secretly negotiating with our enemies in Dublin and also talking with the Roman Catholic Church about feather bedding the IRA prisoners. Under God's law, those who take life have forfeited their own. And I make a call from this platform for a return to God's word, capital punishment for capital crime.
There is no question that the prisoners in Long Kesh today and in Crumlin Road Jail and in the other prisons, the women in Armagh, are political prisoners. They are there because whether they have or have not committed the offences of which they're charged, whether that is shooting police, soldiers, bombing, whatever, they would not have done these things were it not for the special conditions that exist in this country, with an army of occupation, the British soldiers, Saracens, people's homes getting raided every night, children getting shot dead in the street with plastic bullets by the police and the army, and with the repression and torture that still goes on to this day. So these prisoners are special prisoners, special category prisoners. And it's fairly obvious that if these people were common criminals, they would not be prepared to starve themselves to a long, slow and agonizing death. The world opinion has quite rightly condemned the British, but the British media and the British government have always been much keener and more eager to condemn torture if it's in Russia or South Africa or Spain or Latin America, but they don't want to know about what their government and their soldiers and their policemen are doing here in Northern Ireland on their behalf and at the taxpayers' expense to the people here who are suffering some of the worst conditions in Europe. You've got 18% unemployment. In some of the Catholic areas, you have 50% male unemployment, and things are getting worse all the time. And you have police and army repression every day on the street.
Nach 7 Monaten wurde der Hungerstreik beendet. Die britische Regierung gewährte geringfügige Hafterleichterungen. Doch die republikanische Bewegung steht vor einem neuen Problem. Die Briten wollen Irland als nahegelegenes Billiglohnland für das europäische und amerikanische Kapital erschließen. Dafür muss Nordirland befriedet werden. Die britische und die südirische Regierung verhandeln über eine Wiedervereinigung Irlands, das unter dem Diktat der Europäischen Gemeinschaft und der NATO stehen soll. Den Protestanten wird die verhasste Wiedervereinigung schmackhaft gemacht, indem ihnen wirtschaftliche Verbesserungen in Aussicht gestellt werden. Für die Katholiken wäre die Wiedervereinigung ein lang ersehnter Teilerfolg, mit dem sich viele zufrieden geben würden. Die Hoffnung der republikanischen Bewegung auf ein sozialistisches Irland wäre jedoch damit für lange Zeit zunichte gemacht.